Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Okay, so I am seeing tons of people filing in right now. If you guys have joined any of our SF City events before, you know this is where I make the joke about pretending that everybody is filing in an audience and that we are in real life. Well, very, very soon. I am Jen Stojkovic. I'm the Executive Director of SF City. I will be your host for today's conversation. This is going to be a really cool conversation. I'm glad that you are spending your lunchtime with us, or coffee potentially if you are on the East Coast, because we have some great speakers. This conversation has been going on at SF City about how we can break more San Franciscans into the tech industry for years now. This is our fourth time doing this series. Our first two were in person. We went virtual last year, and I do sincerely hope that this is our last virtual event that we have to do for Breaking into Tech, and that we go back to in person very, very soon. So we have several amazing panelists in store for you. Before we get to them, I am going to go through some quick housekeeping and remarks. It is my job. So first off, today's conversation is going to be divided into 3 fireside chats. The reason we're doing that is because we find this is the coolest way to do a deep dive into some of the work going on at each of these companies. Then, after the fireside chat is when we will bring everybody up to do a Q&A. So we will not do an individual Q&A after every single chat. We're going to bring the whole motley crew back up at the very end, and we will do a chat all together. Next, Q&A. Of course, you're going to have conversations throughout today's conversation, and we encourage you to drop them down in the Q&A. Hold on. I never know which way that I got to point. Okay, there we go. Q&A down there. Little Q&A button that's got a little red 1. That's where you're going to want to drop all your questions. So if you have questions as Deepti or Jacqueline or Tony are speaking, feel free to drop them in down there, and then we will get to them as soon as we can at the very end. All right, next. Is this going to be recorded? How on earth am I going to keep track of all this incredible information that is shared today? Well, the good news for you is that we always record these webinars so that you can share it out, nerd out with all of your friends, and continue sharing the awesome content that we are creating. So you will get a recording link after we have concluded. Lastly, we want you to be posting on social media about today's event, about your thoughts, anything that you want us to know about. So if you are going to be posting in today's event on social media, we want you to use the hashtag #BreakIntoTech, and of course, tag SF City. You'll see Jackie from the team also dropped it in the chat if you are joining on Zoom right now. So the last thing that I'm going to say is, who is SF City? I also got to do a quick pitch here. So we are San Francisco's Tech Trade Association. We work with tech companies to make them the most amazing citizen that we can in the community in San Francisco. Today's event is a great example of one of those conversations. We've been working with a number of these companies for years now, as well as JVS, who I'm going to bring up in just one moment, and specifically working on workforce development and how we can get more folks into the tech sector. It's going to be a little bit different now that we are in a remote first environment. We know that as San Francisco moves forward, things are going to change. Things are changing a little bit in downtown. Things are changing a little bit in our industry and how people are hiring. But with change comes great opportunity. So let's hear a little bit about that opportunity. So Lisa Countryman-Quiros, CEO of JVS, one of our most amazing One City Forum members. Let's welcome you up on stage to open us up before we get to the chats. All right, Lisa, we got you.
Thank you, Jen. You got
Awesome.
me.
All right, I will turn it over to you to welcome today's event.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone to Breaking into Tech. I want to thank you for joining us today as we work together to help increase access to great jobs in tech. As Jen said, my name is Lisa Countryman-Quiros, and I am the CEO of JVS. JVS stands for Jewish Vocational Service. We are one of the premier workforce development organizations working across the Bay Area and now also in other parts of California, as well as remote training delivery allows us to do. At JVS, our job is to help open up pathways to good jobs and economic mobility for those who've experienced barriers to opportunity. We are so proud of our work as the City of San Francisco's Tech SF coordinator, working to bring together tech companies, tech training providers, and vibrant local talent. Together, collectively, we are building accessible pathways and diverse talent pipelines. During the pandemic, tech has been literally the only sector in the Bay Area to have experienced growth and has in fact added jobs. As we look to the future, we know that this is only going to increase. Tech is going to be the major source of growth in opportunities. And this was dramatically illustrated by a recent report from McKinsey. Events like this one today not only open up doors for job seekers, they are also critical for reducing the sense of isolation that people experience during job search. And in this year of quarantine, we are all very, very familiar with and empathetic with that feeling. So I want to thank you for joining us today and for being part of the solution. With that, I'd like to welcome back Jen.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We look forward to having you attend today's event. All right, so with that being said, let's bring up our first speaker. All right, Tony Bush from Okta, welcome up on stage. Welcome, welcome. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jen.
Thanks for coming. Where are you joining us from? I see you've got a good office set up.
I do. You know, it's I'm in San Jose, and I've taken one of my kids' rooms and made it my office. So that works when they get out of the house.
I love how many people that we work with that have a playroom / office now.
There you go. You have to have it to stay sane, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get started, Tony, do you mind just quickly introducing yourself to the audience and what you do at Okta?
Yeah, sure thing. So my role at Okta, I'm responsible for recruiting all of our technologists and product folks. So it's not just me, but we've got a great team of recruiters who are out there looking for people who do software engineering, who work in IT, security, product management, product marketing. So the fun work, all the folks who build what Okta sells.
Yeah, awesome. So you've seen quite a shift then. I'd love to start today's conversation about what it was like, let's say, March 2020 at Okta and what it is like now, April 2021. How have things shifted?
Yeah, that's a good one. So, you know, those of you who understand the world of recruiting and the work we do, it is very personalized, right? You talk to people every day, and when people come to interview at your company, it's an opportunity for you to basically market your company, to make sure that they choose you. And when people couldn't come visit the office, that was off the table. And so we had to quickly determine how could we continue to create that, what we call a psychological contract, you know, get people excited about you and think about your company when they make their hire, when they make their decision to join a new company. So we did things like, you know, create a video. That's not a new thing. I think a lot of companies create videos, but the videos we created that would go along with our outreach to candidates was all about creating a visual of our culture. Because if you can't come in, you can't walk the halls, you can't feel the vibe, it's difficult to get people to buy into you. So we did that. And in technology, there's this notion, especially in the Valley, to determine if someone can really write code. They use a whiteboard every meeting. So they get up to the whiteboard and they do all this writing. And so we couldn't do that virtually. So we used a vendor that helped us get there and created a virtual whiteboard. So those are some of the changes we made to get to a place where we could continue to assess in the right way. And so today, it's you know, there was maybe a little bit of change in getting used to not seeing people. And today, we're very used to it. In fact, we're seeing a lot of gains and improvements in how we work because things go faster when you're just virtual.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like always on culture too.
A little bit, yeah.
So one of the things that comes when you are moving quick and things are going very quickly is that there's new barriers that you could be identifying. And so what if some of the challenges and barriers to some of the remote hiring, especially in terms of equity that you've seen so far, and how has Okta been tackling those?
Yeah, you know, so there's certainly barriers for folks who maybe don't have the kind of access that most folks in the Valley have. I think everyone has a laptop or two or three. Some of the things that we've done are tied to our strategies as a company. So for instance, we leaned into remote work almost immediately because it was part of how we were moving forward as a company anyway. The pandemic accelerated it for us. And so some of the things that we've done are to really think about the different parts of the country that not only have technical talent, but also have diverse communities. And so we think about cities like Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago, Washington, DC, and going to where the talent is and making sure that we're easily accessible by posting and on sites that are highly trafficked by people of different backgrounds. So really going to that talent to try to reduce that barrier rather than sort of, hey, find us if you can, and hopefully, you know who we are, and we'll talk to you when you find us. So going to them is really what we've tried to do to create, to reduce that barrier.
That's a great point in terms of the different communities, particularly some communities of color tend to maybe not be on LinkedIn. I'm curious, what are the different avenues that you use to recruit and make your opportunities visible to folks from all over? And what tips would you give to employers that are joining today about how they can put those types of processes in place?
Well, I've done this for a little while, and from company to company, it seems that, folks sort of look inward and think that, oh, we've got to solve it. We've got to figure it out on our own. There are a lot of experts out there who can help you. And so knowing that, we just as a course of work, we do partner externally with people who are expert in particular areas. So for instance, we like to be part of events like Afrotech. We like to partner with groups that can help us find more diverse talent, like Qualigents, and get their assistance on determining where do we go and how do we post, and not how, but where are we going to get the best talent that is diverse, that can help us create the kind of products we want to create, or market the way we want to market, or whatever function they might be part of. So it's rather than trying to figure out on your own, seek help externally to make sure you're doing it right and getting to the right people.
Is there any particular, so you mentioned Afrotech, but are there any particular organizations that you'd like to recommend to folks?
Yeah, there's one we're using right now. It's called Qualigents, and their expertise is in building diverse pipelines for underrepresented minorities and women for technology. So hits exactly what my group in particular is interested in doing, and we're seeing results, which is also the important part. Firstly, there's not every group is going to be perfect, but I think you have to start somewhere. And where we are with Qualigents is really at the beginning phases of our relationship, and we're starting to see some pretty good returns in areas of work that have just historically been very challenging to find talent. So we're pretty excited where to lead, because like I said, it's to continue to do the same thing and look inward is probably not the right thing. You want to go external and get a little bit of help.
And for folks that are joining as job seekers, what are some ways that you think these folks can make sure that they're getting that type of visibility and access as well?
Well, I think as individuals, you definitely want to look in more than a few places, right? I think you want to become part of a group. There are groups on LinkedIn. There are groups like, the ones I've talked about, like Afrotech. There's a number of other ways that you can identify what those groups are. Go online and search. There's Black Society of Engineers. That's another one. So if you identify the groups that resonate with you, that's one way. You also want to it's really, if provided you do have access, I hope that most folks do. If you don't, your public libraries can probably give you access as well. But do a search online simply about the kind of work that you want to perform. And then you'll find a number of companies that will be popping up that are going to say, hey, we're looking for you. There's also a lot of job sites, right, that I'm sure people are going to, like Indeed. Now, of course, you want to network. Knowing people is certainly going to help you get there. The problem is not everyone knows someone. and that is a challenge. I remember very early in my career, I didn't know anyone and in tech, and the way that I got there was by taking baby steps and talking to people who were associated with it, or introducing myself. Sometimes you have to jump out of your comfort zone a little bit and introduce yourself to other folks to get those avenues. But it's identify groups that can help you get there, and they'll inform you. Definitely do your homework, build a list of companies that are of interest to you, and go to common sites that will also list the kind of jobs that you would have interest in. So you want to go in a multifaceted way to make sure that your name is out there.
Excellent tips. Just as a reminder to everybody, if you have questions for Tony or any of the other upcoming speakers, you could drop them in the Q&A and we will get to them all at the end. So Tony, how do you measure equity in the hiring process? Is there any lessons that you've learned that you would like to share with perhaps some HR folks or recruiters that are joining today?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was sometimes companies are like, hey, here's a big audacious goal, and we're gonna increase to some magic number, whatever that number is. Generally, what I've seen is it's unreasonable, and the expectations then are not met, and then people become dejected and sort of kind of stop. I think you need to set reasonable goals first, goals that you can meet, and then it's incremental steps. And what we do, at least at Okta, is that we live in data, right? And of course, like most companies, you have an applicant tracking system. We also have a lot of different ways to measure the inward flow of candidate pipelines and how candidates are progressing from being an applicant to being hired. And ideally, what you want to see is the same rate of success per group. So if a woman engineer is applying for the same job as a man, you'd want to see similar success rates through that pipeline, from application to screen to on-site interview to hire. And when you start to see differences, you'll want to probe into that and understand, well, why is that? And if it's happening at one particular spot in the process, say at the on-site interview or virtual interview phase, then you can dig in to understand, well, what's being asked? What kind of questions are we asking? Are the questions different? And uncover all of those particular issues, and then fix them, right? So it's set goals that are reasonable so that you're making progress, and then keep ratcheting those up. And as you look at success, I think any success is going to be an upward trend, right? Thinking in terms of, if you want to have more underrepresented minorities in your software engineering group or your marketing team or whatever it might be, measure it. Where are you today? Where do you want to be? And along the way, see what that incremental gain is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about growth in the right direction.
Yep.
So the last question I'm going to ask you is for folks that are joining that are not in HR and they're not recruiters, but perhaps they're working at Okta or they're working at Workday or Slack, and they say, I want to really help with creating more diverse hires. I want to actually be part of this at my company. Is there any tips that you can give to employees about how they could be allies or champions to the work that you all are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say become involved, and not just at your company. That is definitely important. Talk to your recruiting team and understand what it is that they would like to see. Not every group has the same need. We have a term called build balanced teams. Instead of just thinking of it as diversity overall, it's what does that particular team need. And so, for instance, if the team is say a marketing team and it's all one particular group, determine what that balance looks like, and then partner with groups externally. So, for instance, there's a group that I've become going to do some more work with called the Hidden Genius Project, where they develop young men of African American descent who want to become technologists or they want to work in tech. And the way that they're developing them is by just getting them opportunities. And so any group like that, becoming a bridge for the folks there, whoever they are, if they're adults or school age, building a bridge so that they know that, hey, there's a person who could help me get introduced to a particular company. And so basically being a bridge, understanding what the needs are, and then becoming involved in groups that are developing people who can come to your company to help you reach that, reach your goals of becoming more balanced. So there are ways that you have to dedicate your time and make sure that you understand the need and then deliver on it.
Amazing. All right, well, Tony, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain what you're doing at Okta. And I know that there's lots of questions that are popping up for Tony. So we will be bringing him back up on stage shortly at the end of today's program. So I will bid you adieu, Tony, and I will welcome Deepti up on stage.
Hey, Jen.
Hi. Hey, lady, how are you?
You know, hanging in there.
I love the honesty. You know, Tony's like, well, I'm actually in a playroom. This isn't an office.
I actually made my bed and took all of the tutus and butterfly wings that had been scattered on the floor before this call. The joys of children and working from home.
I'm hiding the bed behind me. So I have a semblance of professionalism.
Yeah. I've lost all hope of that. So here we go.
Well, things are turning, okay? The CDC's new guidelines that came out today, right? You see those?
It's exciting. It was really exciting.
All right. So I have a feeling that DT is going to be on team, wants to go back into an office.
100%.
Okay.
The extrovert in me is screaming to talk to people. So I will be back as soon as it is safe for me and my colleagues.
All right. Well, I think that's a good jump off point. So Deepti Rohatgi, welcome on stage. If you don't mind, could you actually tell the folks that are joining today a little bit about what you do at Slack? Because it is very interesting, the work we're going to talk about today.
Sure. So I lead Slack for Good and Public Affairs, which is pretty much like corporate affairs and government affairs. I've been at Slack for 6 years. And I think what we're going to talk today mostly about is our program called Next Chapter.
All right. So Next Chapter, for folks that are not familiar, let's first hear what it is, and then everybody settle in, and it's going to be quite a fascinating conversation.
So Next Chapter is our program to increase the number of formerly incarcerated individuals in the tech sector. So the broader goal of Slack for Good is to increase the number of underrepresented individuals in the tech sector. And the program we decided to start with was targeting the specific group of individuals. And it's twofold. To one, shift perceptions of this often overlooked community and their talent. And second, to also increase the number of this community within the tech sector. So that's what we do at Slack. And that's a program we've been at since I think we were only about 110 employees. It's taken us a long time to build a program that's scalable.
So if you're only at 110 employees when this started, absolutely. I mean, Stuart and the executive team, they had to be hands-on with it. What did it look like bringing something this audacious to the team? How did you get that executive buy-in and leadership? Sure. And then maybe we'll talk about the employee buy-in afterwards.
Sure. It was actually pretty easy to get Stuart's buy-in. He wrote, when we were still this small, he gave us a Christmas gift because they were, again, only like 100, 150 of us at the time. And he gave us a beautiful Christmas note and a copy of the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. And everything was going great at Slack at the time. We were the new darling, you know, everyone's like, oh, this is going to change the world. And one thing he noted was that it's really important when you're at the top to think about the folks at the bottom and what you're doing to help them. And then we all read Just Mercy as a company, and we were just inspired to do something. So I talked to Stuart after the holiday. I was like, I think we should go to San Quentin. And so I took him and a bunch of his immediate directs, and we went to the Last Mile program in San Quentin. And this was in 2016, maybe 2016 we went. And we were just blown away by the talent we saw. The gentlemen in there were learning how to code and were building phenomenal things without access to the internet. And we just saw sheer talent and drive. And frankly, that's what we look for in our employees. And we set off figuring out how to build the program. There was one gentleman who we actually interviewed while he was incarcerated. So all the interviews actually went to San Quentin to interview him. He was given like a kind of a grant to go through Hack Reactor, and then the possibility to interview when he joined Slack. And he interviewed, and it just wasn't gonna work. We knew he had the raw talent, but they were still only, I think at that point, maybe 300 of us. We just couldn't give him the support we needed or he needed. And so Ali is now running Chan Zuckerberg's criminal justice program and funds our program and gives out tens, if not hundreds of $1 millions a year. And so he's doing great and is still obviously a great partner. But we built a program in 2018 that we launched that was a little more systemic and a little more sustainable. And so, yeah, that's what we did. So we had 3 gentlemen in our first cohort, all have full-time offers. We scaled to Zoom, Square, and Dropbox last year with 8 apprentices, and they've all gotten full-time offers as well. And this year we're at 11 companies and 21 apprentices. And I mean, I see the talent, they're going to be fine. They're going to do great. Wow. So that's our program.
That is, I don't think folks were expecting to hear that. And just a reminder to everybody, let's drop that in the Q&A if you have any questions about how Deepti pulled off this incredible program. So were you guys the first tech company that they brought on? Or just maybe the biggest?
Who brought on?
Like when you started like the Next Chapter program, were you guys the first?
No, I built it. So it's mine.
Oh, wow. So you actually
no, it's my program. Yeah, it's Slack's Next Chapter program. So we built it.
Okay. And so,
yeah.
But you have other companies that now
have
signed up.
Who've signed on. And it's not a small burden. I mean, it's not like, we want to make sure our apprentices go into a welcoming environment. So we require all the companies to give us an all hands where we can talk about the issues around criminal justice. We train all the managers on how to be supportive of this community. We provide executive coaches to our apprentices. We send technical mentors because it's a big shift, right? Like working in tech is hard. It's hard for me, right? It's very stressful. And imagine coming from an incarcerated situation into a place like Slack or Dropbox. That's a big shift. So we want to make sure they are not only supported from their work, but from the community that they're entering, so they can bring their whole selves into the office. So it's a pretty big lift for all of our partner companies, frankly. And it goes very well. Almost all our company, well, actually, all of our companies are in for round 3. That we're in round 2, and then we have 7 more. And now we have a wait list of 18 companies for next year.
Wow.
18 more. So I think it's a good recognition of the talent that exists. And when people are thinking about actionable things we can do around equality, this is one.
So I've got 2 questions. I'll ask the first one.
Sure.
Do not seek to make this like a separate nonprofit? How did you go about structuring this within an actual company? I know for folks that are listening that say, I've always wanted to build a program at my company, but they say this is what nonprofits should do, or we should partner.
Yeah, I mean, we do partner, right? Like, we are not experts in racial equity or the criminal justice system. To be clear, we are experts on building enterprise software. So we partner with the Kellogg Foundation. We partner with The Last Mile. We partner with John Legend's Free America and Commons, Imagine Justice, and many, many other orgs, and they tell us what to do. And so there is no way Slack could do it alone. We wouldn't do a good job. And so we talk to people who teach us how to do better. And our partners are incredibly vocal and tell me to do things differently all the time. And they are usually right. Yeah.
How do you go about in terms of getting like internal funding? So for folks that are joining from companies where they want to take a similar effort or endeavor, what did that process look like, getting that executive buy-in? Obviously a trip to San Quentin, I'm sure helped, but
yeah,
how did you do it?
I mean, we had already signed the 1% equity pledge at that point. And it's not that expensive of a program, if I'm honest. Like, it's not that expensive. So it's not like this is costing us millions of dollars a year. It certainly isn't. And our other companies pay for their apprentices and their training. So it's not it's not a huge financial burden. It's frankly getting people comfortable with this notion, right? Like you used to be sitting next to somebody who often committed a violent crime. And why is that a good thing to do for not only the company, for the product, right? And for your culture. And so I think the harder part isn't the funding. The harder part is getting people on board with doing something that is considered to be hard when it isn't actually hard. Everyone's got the resources. They just need the courage to do something like that.
How do you convince folks that it's worth the bottom line? It's worth the extra support for managers to these types of employees?
I am super lucky to have Stuart Butterfield as my CEO. And he truly believes in this. So none of this would be possible without him. And we took 200 employees to San Quentin and I held their hands, is really what it is, right? You have to get proximate to the issue. We had John Legend come in and do an all hands for us. That helped a lot. And so, just getting proximate to the issue and explaining to people why this is important and why these individuals have the talent. And there are millions of people who are system impacted, who could and should be great engineers. And why aren't they having the opportunity? And what do we have to do to give them the opportunity so they can thrive, right? And frankly, provide hope to the other millions who are waiting their turn to get out. And so that's why we work so hard.
It's amazing.
You're amazing.
How's like the remote first environment? A lot of people are just gonna never come to the Slack office. You're gonna have people on computers. Are you able to reach more talent this way? What do those changes look like?
So the one thing I thought was super interesting is how our apprentices are actually doing better, because many of them, almost all of them, don't live in the Bay Area. And they get to stay with their families and their communities. So one of our apprentices this year had a 2-year-old daughter who was incarcerated, and she was able to stay with her mom in New York. And we obviously helped her with childcare, but like being able to be with your community and your people is just such a great support that I know we're actually remote first with this program now, because it's great for our apprentices. And it's frankly a great way to help spread the notion that they're.
Ask you before we are hopping off to our next talk. And then of course, reminder to everybody, Deepti will hop on at the end. So any questions that you have for her, I'm sure this very, very interesting program is posing a lot of ideas in everyone's head. So drop them in the Q&A. The last question I'm going to ask is, what does the future of your program look like? And what do you see happening in the next few years? What would success look like?
So one of the things that I'm seeing that makes me very happy is our community of apprentices, both old and new, supporting each other, right? Like they look over each other's code if they have questions. And so I would love for this community to be strong enough that they don't need us anymore, right? Like the best thing a nonprofit can do is work itself out of existence. So if there are no more barriers to formerly incarcerated individuals to joining tech, done. Peace out. I will go nap and raise my babies. But that is the dream, right? The dream is you don't need it anymore. But I think we still have a long way to go. But I am encouraged by the number of companies who want to bring Next Chapter to their companies. In our wildest dreams, we never thought it would go this well, this fast.
It's amazing. All right, Deepti, I am going to have you hop off for now. Thank you for that amazing chat. And I'm going to bring you back up on stage after. Jacqueline, we got you up. Perfect. Jacqueline Green, welcome to the stage. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jen. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I'm also dialed in from a bedroom, transformed as a home office. I'm loving all of the synergies here and making it work.
That was the first thing I was going to ask. I'm like, okay, she's in a bedroom disguised as an office. What is it, month 14?
Exactly. Teenage girl bedroom turned home office. It works out quite well.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Well, that is the cleanest teenage girl office or teenage girl room I've ever seen. I can tell you, I did not look like that. Awesome. Well, welcome, Jacqueline. First off, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everybody joining today, a little bit about what you do at Workday.
Yes, absolutely. So I head up Workday's diversity, talent acquisition, and internal mobility team, programs and strategy, which also include opportunity on-ramps, which I know we're going to spend some time talking about. I've been with Workday just coming up on 3 years next month, and I'm based in the East Bay. So I haven't been into the city, and it feels like too long. I'm looking forward to getting back over the bridge and to short time here when we're all able to start getting together again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how things have changed in the last 14 months or so at Workday, and how your work has changed. It would be good to kick off with that, and what the experience has been like so far.
Yes, so hearing Tony kick us off on the experience adjusting to this virtual environment, both talent attraction and onboarding, and remote work, it sounds like we've had a similar journey here at Workday. I think, if anything, our virtual capabilities has allowed us to accelerate hiring into new geographies and to do so more agile and quickly. Workday is very employee driven, so we are a values driven organization. Employees are our number one value, and I think ensuring that we had a process set up to support our employees as they transition to remote work, and also ensuring that we were setting up our recruiting initiatives to allow for us to assess talent, skills, and capabilities in a way that felt really consistent in our in-person practices. I think 14 months, if that's where we are today, I feel like we're in a great space, and I think that there's a lot that we've learned through this journey that we're going to continue to adapt and adjust and take forward, even when we're back in offices. One area that I am personally seeing a transformation in that really jazzes me up in this virtual environment, and Lisa was so great to kick us off, is around the great work that our nonprofit workforce development organizations are doing. They made the adjustment right alongside of us on the corporate side to move to being able to upskill and provide training pathways to their job seekers virtually. And how incredible it's been, Jen, to be able to see more access for individuals that have, whether it's transportation, similar to what Deepti said, whether it's staying within their communities, whether it's being able to stay in an essential line job and then access training in the evenings. So this shift that we've seen on the provider side for training for individuals that are skilled through alternative routes has been really incredible, both for the job seekers and then certainly for organizations like ours that are invested in hiring individuals that may be skilled through alternative routes.
Right. Well, that is, it's such an interesting time right now. And I think one of the key things we're pulling out of all these conversations is that the remote first environment that certainly seems to be here to stay is presenting a lot of opportunities. It was a challenge at first, but it could really open up a lot more. So what kinds of programs, and obviously you mentioned opportunity on-ramps at the beginning, are you really kind of seeing take off now in this new environment, and what does that look like?
So opportunity on-ramps, just taking a quick step back and sharing about our programs within Workday. So we have a fundamental belief that talent is everywhere, but that opportunity is not. And we've been running these programs to support job seekers from non-traditional backgrounds since 2014. And we've seen the growth of our programs, really expand and scale from what started in our social impact space and environment. So run really as part of Workday's commitment to our communities and in alignment with Workday's foundation and investment strategy, to now being a formalized part of how we think about diversity, talent acquisition, and pipelines at Workday. So over the course of the last year, Workday has we've developed some external commitments, in alignment with how Tony was speaking about creating accountability and ensuring that we have attainable goals to move equity and to move diversity, talent acquisition, retention within our organizations. We've seen the value, and we also know that we need to do more as it relates to hiring through opportunity on-ramps, which has created a new commitment for us to be hiring 20% of our early to mid-career talent through our opportunity on-ramps programs, which is really exciting. And we've also made a shift from the work being positioned within our social impact space to now being part of talent acquisition at Workday. So when a hiring manager goes to open up a rec and they're thinking about how they can diversify their talent pool, they're thinking certainly about some of our traditional sourcing strategies through university or through professional hiring. And they're also thinking about opportunity on-ramps. I'll again make a plug for JVS because Lisa's on, although there are a number of amazing organizations that we're thinking of and that we're working with. But JVS has incredible individuals that are skilled, that are ready to go. And it's I think really awesome, Jen, to see how we're able to accelerate these pathways for employment into Workday as part of our overall talent acquisition strategy.
20% is a substantial commitment. That's really exciting. Would you mind just quickly clarifying for folks? So what types of groups does opportunity on-ramps particularly focus on?
Yes. So in terms of hiring and the roles that we're filling, we are essentially looking at our early to mid-career roles. So those that are that wouldn't be executive level roles or hard to fill roles. And then essentially across the business. So we hire predominantly in our tech space, right? The number of hiring that is done within our Workday ecosystem tends to be heavy on our product and technology side. And then we have a number of business operations related roles that we're able to tap into talent skilled through alternative routes and bring them on board. So essentially across all of our business areas, we've been hiring predominantly in the US. This year we've launched our first apprenticeship program in Dublin. So we're definitely looking at global scale, which is really cool. I know this is a San Francisco based group here, but we've also expanded hiring outside of San Francisco to really across the US in alignment with how we're thinking about hiring at Workday.
So for those that are joining from a company and they're looking at, wow, Workday's made a 20% goal to, fill this amount of roles with these types of folks. How do you recommend they approach their teams about these types of goals and any tips that you would want to give to them?
Yes. So I think having the conversation around skills first hiring versus perhaps looking at degrees attained and really unpacking the roles and essentially what's the underlying factor, what skills are needed versus is a 4-year degree truly required? And or can we be looking at talent that may be overlooked? So think about the number of caregivers, especially now we're talking about women re-entering the workforce, having lost the majority of jobs last year. So having those intentional conversations, Jen, with hiring managers and with leaders to say, okay, these are the skills that are needed. Is it possible for us to look at individuals that are skilled through alternative means? Like Europe is a great training provider. We've been partnering with them for years. I'm thinking about JVS, about individuals that are being upskilled, and or should we be opening up our pipeline to talent that may have gaps on their resumes, that may intrinsically have the skills, that have the prior experience, but could be overlooked right now because their skills may not be, their current work experience may not be as new or as fresh to someone that's coming from a competitor. So I think that internal advocacy, asking some thoughtful questions, and then ultimately it's bringing the folks on and letting them shine and allowing the space for them to really thrive within your ecosystems. I think that's where, just as Deepti mentioned, it becomes less of a sell on us and it's more of storytelling through the job seekers themselves.
All right, so hot take. What do you think about the 4-year degree requirement? This seems to be one of the questions that we get a lot from tech folks. Do you think that we could see a shift away from more, skills-based hiring and less looking at the educational requirements?
I think we're already seeing it for certain. I know that many companies are making external statements around dropping degree requirements. We're certainly on a path of really scrutinizing all of our open requisitions at Workday to ensure that we're hiring for skills first. And when we're able to drop the degree requirements. And I know that we're not alone in this. It's really exciting. I think it's opening up more pathways than we anticipated. And it's also incredibly important to recognize the great work that our workforce development partners are doing to help upskill individuals so that they are ready to launch a thriving wage career in our ecosystems in the tech sector.
That's amazing. All right, so we have folks, of course, that are joining from the job seeker side. This is a good cross section of audience members. What types of tips would you give to them for how they can really put those skills forward and get in front of employers in a way that it's helping get them identified out of the pool of candidates?
Yeah, so I think the access to social capital piece is huge, and Tony touched on it. I hear so many of our peers in the space speaking the same language of taking LinkedIn and ensuring that you are creating pathways for you to network with other individuals, whether that's a short note to an individual at a company saying, hey, I'm on a path to pursue a role in your space. Would you have 15 minutes to share with me? Perhaps not going to the executives, right? But to go to people that are in peer level roles. We host a number of these type of coffee chats with our employees and with job seekers in the Workday ecosystem. I can tell you personally, I've had a number of connections made by job seekers who are doing just this, of proactively reaching out and asking for time or for introductions. And then making sure that they're visible, right? That they're showing up in networking forums. Virtual first, I think, is creating a lot of access to networking and to skills-based, into social networking capacities. And, again, just making sure that their LinkedIn profiles are staying fresh. And if they're not already tapped into some training providers that are doing amazing work, to take a look at all the great tools and resources out there so that they can get LinkedIn with organizations under the sf.citi belt and beyond.
So before we bring up our other speakers to do the Q&A, is there any sorts of organizations for employers that you would plug that are doing amazing work? And then for job seekers, any types of communities, obviously you mentioned LinkedIn a lot, that you would recommend for them to get access to that social capital?
Yes. So we have a number of workforce development partners that we work very closely with that are doing incredible work. So JVS being one, Europe another, Upwardly Global here in the Bay Area is doing incredible work to help their job seekers land gigs. We just started a new partnership with General Assembly that I'm really excited about, helping to create pathways for their graduates to land careers here at Workday. And I think so that a few of many organizations, again, that are doing awesome work. I would say following that similar path for job seekers to take a look at those organizations if they're not already plugged in, and certainly thinking about tools and social media. We're on Facebook Live here. They're, thinking about our social networks as well. And certainly LinkedIn is one of many that's helping to bridge the gap. And I think in this virtual environment, there's been a lot of connections made in the last year and a half that may have been harder to do when we were in person.
All right. Well, you are ready to get to the questions from the audience? We got a lot of great submitted questions, so hopefully we can get to a good chunk of these. Deepti and Tony, if you want to hop back up on stage, we've got you. All right. I'm going to, some of these questions I honestly think everybody might have some good input on, but I'll try to get to as many as possible. So first one, what are some concrete things that tech companies can do to eliminate unconscious bias towards some of these underrepresented groups at the early parts of the interview process? So perhaps, Tony, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on this, and Jacqueline actually mentioned some of it earlier. It's what we have found is that there's definite bias in most interview scenarios, and sometimes it's unintended. I think everyone who goes through life, they have some sort of bias whether they know it or not. So it's one of the things that we're focused on now is making sure that we have alignment on skills. And what I mean by that is, making judgments based on subjective, how do you feel about someone, or, oh, they didn't go to the right school, or, they've only done this for a little while in industry. But if you can identify the skills required for the role, make sure that everyone is aligned on what great looks like and assessing for those skills, and then look at the outcome of the assessment. That's how you're going to take bias out. It's got to be based on fact. It's going to be based on the skills, and not on, well, they haven't worked for this kind of company. Oh, well, they don't have the 4-year degree. That's one of the, I think, keys and basic ways to make sure that you're pulling it out.
Jacqueline or Deepti, anything that you want to add?
I think that summarizes it very strongly. We on the product side at Workday, we do have a tool that allows for mass resume reviews, which is pretty cool. So that's something that hopefully other organizations will continue to take on. So removing any information that would introduce bias from the onset as well. But Tony, you hit on it very well.
Great. Okay, Deepti, the next question is for you. Let's get off mute. Cool. So Krista would like to know, this is very interesting, how you provide an inclusive culture to welcome workers from underrepresented groups, but in particular, measuring employee satisfaction from both the main group and perhaps some underrepresented groups that you've brought in, for instance, of course, through your program.
Yeah, so caveat A, I am not in human resources, nor am I a human resource expert. And my amazing colleagues help me make sure I do everything properly, because as mentioned, I'm not a human resources expert. And secondarily, with the apprentices, they have an executive coach who works with them and is frankly completely separate from Slack or their host company. And we think that's really important. So they have someone they can talk to, raise issues, and they can help these individuals manage potential issues they have, and if needed, report back to us. We also have a weekly check-in with them. So we have a re-entry director, a gentleman who works for me. His name is Kenyatta Leal. He spent 21 years in prison, and he leads the program. And so he checks in with them every week and makes sure they're happy, things are going well. If they have any issues, he can either raise it on their behalf, because it's nervous, right? You want to end up in these jobs. You're so excited to change your life. He can help them navigate or raise any issues that they've had at their companies. And there have been, they've certainly been issues. And I think Tony mentioned it, it's unintended most of the times, but there are issues. And so how do we raise them in a productive way to make sure everybody feels like they have agency in making sure that the culture they're in is supportive? So there's just lots of different checkpoints, and frankly, not taking anything for granted.
Yeah. I like the idea of having someone external outside of the company that is providing that kind of support.
Yeah.
So this question, I think, will apply to everybody. We'll start with you, Jacqueline. What metrics do you measure?
So we have 2 products that are helping us to really take a look at our diversity, inclusion, and belonging sentiments. So we essentially look at holistically tracking towards our goals. So thinking about how we are hiring, tracking, and retaining diverse talent across all facets of diversity within our Workday ecosystem. We also have a similar index that allows us to understand sentiment of belonging and how our workforce is feeling that they have a sense of belonging within Workday. So it's not just about the numbers that we're bringing on folks to hire, but also ensuring that they feel that Workday is a place and has a sentiment for them to stay and retain. Data is key. Tony mentioned it. It's really important that we're looking underneath the hood, that all of our organizations are really taking the time to understand where we are today, setting goals, understanding where we are today, and making sure that we have an aspirational, forward-looking place to ensure that we're making some meaningful change in this work.
Tony, what are you measuring?
Well, let me first say that, I think we aspire to be where Workday is. I think it sounds like there's a lot of good programs that are in place that they have going. We, I would say, are a little more early in our journey to get where we want to be. Our CEO, Todd, says the same, like, hey, we're taking the right steps, but we've got a lot of work to do. With all that said, we are measuring what I think I talked about earlier, measuring what the success rates are in the funnel. So at this point, we're just trying to take a look at, well, how many people are coming in who are women, who are underrepresented, and how many are making it to the finish line, and trying to determine, are we seeing the success and are we not, and why if we're not. And so at this point, it's relatively basic on how are we doing and how can we implement change so that we can see the results that we want to see. I think we definitely want to be in a place where we're measuring sentiment. I know that we do plenty of surveys, and we probably have that data. But we're, like I said, we're developing and getting to a place where we're going to be able to get much better information and make change.
Deepti, I will go to you. Last question would be what metrics that you look at for your program?
So our program is so small, honestly. Like I feel like I'm faking it if I say we've had 11 apprentices. Like it's only 11 people. Like Jackie and Tony are making like probably dozens, if not hundreds of people jobs. So I don't really feel like I'm not necessarily their level. But one interesting thing that I do think is important to measure is how the companies who take on apprentices, how their employees feel about it. And are they excited about it? And that's something that when we launched in our first 3 companies, I think Square, Zoom, and Dropbox, they said it was one of the best rated all hands of all time for all 3 companies. And that their employees are really excited by it. So it's a different sort of measurement, but I think it's an important measurement to see if programs like these resonate with employees. Because if it resonates with employees, we can start doing more and more and more and more and take bigger risks. And that's where I get, even though it's not really a risk, but that's where I get excited. So our small little program doesn't necessarily have significant metrics. There's much bigger metrics within Slack as a whole that our HR team, again, is experts on, but I am not.
All right. Well, everybody, you are all doing awesome stuff. And to quote Deepti, let's take on more and more and more. I look forward to seeing